First thing I want to show you is the basics of Pix4Dsurvey. So this is your home screen. You can see here projects you've worked on. We've got links out to the community, even some sample data, and you can also see down here your version number. I am logged in over here, so this will take you to the standard Pix4D pages. If you log out, you can see I have the option to start the trial or log in. So even without being logged in, you can actually do quite a lot. And let me show you that first off. First thing, this is Pix4D, and this is another Pix4D product. So I'm going to easily start by just drag and dropping that P4D. You know the format, I think we all do. And I'm going to just put the project in a good spot there and then give it a name. We'll call it Demo 1 and start. So that is going to read the P4D. It's also going to look at the camera parameter files and the offset.xyz, as well as finding all the images. First up, we'll need to tell it where those images are, because I think I've changed the path on this one. And we have a nice new interface for that. And in this case, I've put them in a special structure that we actually have for survey. You can see it inside here. It's that images folder. And now it turned green, so I'll hit OK, and there are images. So as I mentioned, it looks for a couple files, and if you look here in the console, you can see what those files are. So it pulled in the offset.xyz and the camera parameters. That drives the ray cloud, which drives the connection between the point cloud that we have here and the images. So that's what's going on here. Then you can see it also brings in the LAS files individually. Those do need to be created in step 2. If those are not there, you will get nothing here. So let me turn that off. And then here we've got, as I mentioned, the point cloud, the images, a few options over here in the image interface. If you want to adjust that size of the whole thing a little bit, you certainly can. You can zoom on all, similar to other tools you might have used. And that's about it. For the rest of the interface, you can change the background color. You can adjust the point size. Like in this case, the point density is pretty good, so you don't actually want them to be too big or they start to get on top of each other. You'll see it like over here. It gets kind of ugly as you start to try vectorizing. Luckily, this data set's super clean, so it won't be such an issue. But generally, you don't need them to be too massive. I'm going to change it back to a black background just because that's what I like, and close that. Otherwise, now that we have everything here, you can see this is where you get your options to bring in other stuff. Here, edit is pretty standard. You can turn cameras on and off. We have them off by default, but in this case, if I zoom up and out, you can see them there. You do get a thumbnail in each of those after a minute. And what else? You have a few other things. You can turn off that whole left side display of all the content where we have the point clouds and layers, and you'll see that's also where the properties come in over here. And then under help, it's the standard stuff. So if you ever need to know what version you're on, just look here and you'll have it. So that's really the basics of the background stuff in the product. And then let's take a look at what is actually happening as a user, what you get. Just to start off, let's get oriented here. Let's say I want to just take a quick look at what's going on here. I can just click a point in the point cloud, and anytime I'm over a point, I'll have my coordinates down at the bottom there, the XYZ values in the coordinate system I'm working in. So you can see I didn't quite hit the tip of that turn arrow. It's more like up over here, I guess. Oops. And that's all well and good, but if I want to do something like go ahead and actually mark where all of my turn arrows are, I can do that. So I can put that marker there. It comes in, default name is nothing special, but we can call those, well, you can call them whatever you like, turn arrows. And from now we are in that vectorizing mode, and if you want to start quickly marking all of those, you're going to be able to really easily do it. Now, that is kind of the marker concept. We also have these lines, which are 3D. Everything that we have in Survey here is happening in 3D. So I'm just going to vectorize a couple little things and you see what you think as we go. So we saw before how this was a pretty nice clean data set, and that means you can really do your vectorizing quickly, which to me is really a nice thing. I'm just dragging along here, clicking and dragging. If ever you want to change your view while you're looking at things, right click and you can rotate it around. And there's a nice little feature if you are here and you want to left click. Normally it'll give you the sliding pan view there, but if you shift left click, it'll let you just move in the Z. So for this case, if you want to look at a curve, it's really nice. I'm just going to right click and finish that out there. And now I realized I did my curb in the wrong layer. It's not a turn arrow, right? So I'll call that top of curb. Come back over here and pick the line, right click, and move it to the right bit of geometry. Now I also see that this one here is maybe not quite right. I want to just pick that vertex. And if you hit delete on the keyboard, you can get rid of it. Maybe you decide that you want a vertex here instead. Just get on that selected line and click, and you can add a vertex, which is then totally editable. So in terms of how to edit these things, you've got a couple distinct kinds of options. So this one, you can see there's a little noise along the edge there, so I want to be kind of careful not to grab that. What I can do in this case is move it to any other point in the point cloud right around here, pick one that I trust, and I can go off on my way. If I want to pick maybe back of curb instead though, I can do that. See, now I'm moving here in the 3D, but kind of keeping an eye on things over in the 2D, and I can get it really close. But I am limited in this method to working in the point cloud, so I can only move it to a new point in the point cloud. However, you might have noticed down here, at this point when we have nothing selected, there is no properties down in the lower left here. But when we do have a piece of geometry, any kind of geometry selected, we get the basic stats for that. So you can see here it's a pretty flat curve, but it does actually show, what's that, 3 feet of elevation change. So it's possible I made a mistake and picked some stuff that is actually down in the street. We can take a look at that and see in a minute. And then when I pick a vertex along the way, I have the actual vertex there to work with. So in this case, maybe I surveyed that joint and I know the exact results. I could just select here and paste it in. Maybe I really have a nice dense point cloud, or if I increase the point size a little bit, maybe I can see pretty well, like in this case, where the joints are, and I want to just kind of adjust it by eye. So you can always type in a value. You can also, let's see, increment. It's always going to increment by the number of decimals that you have displayed. So in this case, when I use the stepper, it'll move by tenths of feet. So we don't have explicit unit controls yet, so it's always going to be in the coordinate system units that you're working in. So now we can't see too dramatically because there's enough points going on there. It is no longer linked to the point cloud, but we'll be able to see that really well now that I've pivoted it up and totally away. The other thing you can do is, of course, we have these geometries visible in the images as well. And that's where the really good stuff comes in, because by working in the images, we know that we can edit things really nicely. In this case, what's going on? I needed to just right click in here to close that geometry. Now I'm going to come back, pick the vertex again. In this case, I'm going to zoom in a little bit tighter and just drag this guy over to here. That kind of starts the whole initial refinement process. And then here, I'm going to control click, zoom in a bit, and then just scroll along, see if it's a pretty good fit in all these other images. I'm going to shift that just a little tiny bit. Now, you have to remember you're doing all these edits, but in fact, and they are, when you work in the 2D, they're reflected in 3D, but they're never going to go back to your mapper project. You should only be working in Survey once you've finished the work you want to do in mapper. Any edits to the point cloud or anything that you do on the creation side, like back in step 2 in mapper, that's going to mess with your results here. So that's kind of the basics of the creation and editing that you can do. So I hope that's kind of useful. And you do, one thing I didn't mention, in case you didn't notice, like if we take a look here, you can bring in as many bits of geometry as you like. Like if we, let me open up this one I've been working on for a little bit. You can see it's the same project, and I've got a bunch of layers in here, and you can have as many as you like. And the other thing you can do, you can turn those layers on and off individually or in a group if you don't want to see any of it. And the same goes for the point clouds themselves. If you want to turn off a chunk of your point cloud, just go ahead and do it. You can see in this case, there's really not much in these other two. It's mostly in 1 and 3, and you get a nice little bit of indication there about what's active. So those are kind of the big things that you can do. It's that vectorization and display of all of this. The other thing I didn't mention is that you can export. Now, in this case, it's going to be interesting because a license is required to export. Same is actually true for save. Now that I've made some edits in here, that's when it's getting triggered. Now that could be a trial license or it could be just logging in. I personally am going to log in. So that's me. While I'm doing this, if you do have questions, comments, anything you need like that, you can put it in the chat or you can send me an email. And now that that's logged in, it picked up my license, I'm good to go. Same story goes over here. So users can bring in their mapper projects and do basically anything except export and save until they're all set to go. At this point, you can see, like I've got all these asphalt cracks. Maybe that would go out to a special team. If I want to just send that out to the right people, I can just export that, and that will export a DXF, which is also what you get from here. So this export takes all the vector geometry. This export takes just the layer that you have active. So those are kind of the main things. Now, I just want to show you a few other interesting bits and pieces that we've got that might help you see how this all can tie together. So this is another mapper project. In this case, we again have a couple of different point clouds. Note here, these days I've got these 5, actually more, 6 that are all from mapper, and then I have a bit of LiDAR here. So let me zoom in and then you can kind of start to see why LiDAR is interesting in this case. So you can see we've got some water here, and we've got some deep shadow. And in the shadow here, there just wasn't enough to go on. Like if we query the point cloud here, you can see it was just dark down there. So as a result, we didn't get much in the point cloud at all. Even in this case, this can be a nice time to change the color scheme, and sometimes the colors will pop a little bit better, and you can see there's nothing at all in the point cloud down here. Now, we could manually vectorize blindly there if we wanted, but conveniently I have this aerial LiDAR. So I'm going to turn that on, and now you can see we've got points. And what's really cool is because all of this is working in one big set of spatial relationships, I can pick a point in the LiDAR and see where it falls in the images. So in this case, a lot of the camera positions are quite oblique if we turn those on. So the angles are a little bit funky in terms of how it fits here, because we don't have an explicit sense of occlusion or which cameras contribute to a particular image, just how they fit relative to the cameras that are pointed that direction, if that makes sense. So if I want to do some vectorizing here purely on the LiDAR, I can absolutely do that. So here I can start putting in a bit of line work. Maybe I want to call it something totally different. I'll call it temp, and you can see I've already changed what layer it's associated with and the color updated as a result. And then that same bit of geometry is going to be visible in the images. So you still have the possibility to refine in the images if you think there's something there, that will work. So it's a really nice set of tools to be able to work back and forth between the 3D point cloud, the 2D images, and leverage the ray cloud to make it all work nicely in 3D. So I think it's going to work really well for a lot of different kinds of customers. And you can see here, this is a different coordinate system. One note about coordinate systems is we don't do transformations at the moment. So all the LAS project files that came from Mapper are in this same Swiss coordinate system as the LAS that we brought in from the LiDAR. So this is an example of the two working together, same coordinate system, no transformation needed, so everything just works. Okay, so that's all well and good, but you haven't seen everything that kind of makes the combination of scan data and photogrammetric data really interesting, at least to me, quite yet. So this is a big project that we've chopped down to a smaller area of interest, and this is going to be some of the demo data, so this will be available to download for you guys. Let me just start off initially here. You know, this is a Mapper project, so you guys know the concept. I'm going to turn off a few things. And like if we come in here, we can see what's going on in town really well. This is here in Switzerland, but you can't see everything. You know, you can't see very well what's happening down the road here. It's just too narrow. But if I turn that roof off, we can see the roof geometry super well. It's really nice. So that's where I came in here and I vectorized the roof. It went really quickly, especially with these, like you saw before, the ability to really come into the images and refine exactly where you want to put each vertex. You're going to be able to do things really quickly the first time, and then after that, if you need to adjust things a little bit, super straightforward. So that's really nice, and that's a great application here of where photogrammetry lets you capture reality in a way that nothing else is going to. But you know, I'm interested in maybe doing a rehab of this building and I want to understand the whole story a bit better. So I could do some vectorizing here. I could even do some additional stuff, like I could put in a really basic line here that, you know, I can see that it goes from the corner up to the corner. That's cool. That works nicely, really already. In that case, I didn't really want this little extra leg. I'm going to pick that and delete it. So now I could look at this. Oops, man, let me undo that. Let me escape, and now I just have the object selected. So I can see I've got an 8-meter line there, and it's nearly vertical. The actual, let's see, footprint maybe is down about there. And if I look here, I can kind of see it, but it's a little difficult. It's kind of shadowy down there, and it's hard to tell in this case where the real foot of the building is, just because it's a bit dark. But what I really like already is I can see that the building is about 8 meters high, and not just that, but what the actual elevations are at top and bottom. So that's cool, and that's going to be useful. But conveniently, we also have a scan for this project. So in this case, I'm going to now turn off the photogrammetry, turn on the scan. And this was a terrestrial scan. You know, they set up a scanner here. Looks like, I forget where the other ones were. I think there were a couple other ones down this way. So in the end, we got the facade of this building really, really well. Like if you look at that lamppost, no question, if you wanted to put a marker in on that lamppost, it is going to be like spot on. It's there, it's visible, and it's going to work really well. So what I did here was I came in and I vectorized the facade, and it's very much the same story as what we have with vectorizing off the images, in that it's really easy to put in the points, get them really on the point cloud where you want them to be, and then you can still do those individual vertex adjustments. In this case, you can see because all the images were aerial, the ray cloud doesn't help us so much here, but you can turn that totally off and ignore all of that. But in this case, I was able to come in, and you can see now as we get the angles right, not even just that the facade fits the point cloud pretty well, but in fact, as we come in, there's even this bit of drain pipe on the front here, and we could even vectorize that drain pipe separately as we want and really have it be in a separate proper 3D space. So that's a pretty good thing, I think. And that's cool, but it doesn't even finish telling the whole story. Like if we look up here, I'm going to turn off the roof, you can see we actually have a whole lot of detail that's available in there. And I was even able to come in, vectorize the soffit there, you know, that underhang of the eaves, and you can start to see same kind of a story. We could pull out the drain pipe by itself, really get all the geometry of this building with just a couple of scans from the road and from the photogrammetry up above and capture the whole thing. And like I said before, this is really true 3D all the way through. So we're not working off of a mesh or a surface or whatever word you might want to use for it. We've got 3D from the beginning. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And if we go ahead and take this one and export it, I'll just give it a name, demo1 export, and that is a DXF. If you or, well, your customers are using any CAD or GIS kind of a program, they're going to be able to really easily take this and open it up in the next part of their workflow. So I'm just opening up Civil 3D right now, and then I will open this DXF in there and we can take a look at it. So here is Civil 3D, and as I mentioned, I'm just going to go and find that, oops, it's on my other screen, that DXF file that we were just in, and that was, so this is getting all this stuff to work really nicely in Civil 3D is really, I think, not just Civil 3D. It's going to make a big difference for the usability of all of these things for your users. So if we come in, now we're looking at it from the top. If we roll it around and look from the side, you can see we've got the right look to the geometry. But in fact, that's not all. Let's make it a bit bigger there. We actually have all this stuff on the right layers. So if we want to make the, oops, that's down here. We're just a couple clicks away from making everything be really visually the same kind of experience that your users have. You can see here how the roof layer came in with the right names and the right content. So as I change the color to match, it all starts to come together really quickly and easy. So it's going to work really well to be able to bring all this into one scene and get everybody to understand it. And the other thing I should mention, if you look at the XYZ values there at the bottom of the screen, we're getting all the right values there. So it's in at the right XY location and everything is correct. So that's already like a really important consideration. So even if you have users that are using coordinate systems all the way through their whole workflow, they're going to be able to, to go ahead. There we go. So you can see that is not super high quality background imagery, but you can really get a quick and instant confirmation that everything spatially came into the right location. So for me, that's already a really nice thing. So if we jump back over to survey here, you can see really the whole project in the bigger context, and we've got the really special thing, which to me is the ray cloud. You can work quickly, you're in full 3D, and if you need more detail than what you've got here, you've got it in the ray cloud. So to me, anytime that we're working along on something like this manhole kind of a layer, for example, you can see here, there's a couple of different manholes in there. They're really visible in the images. It's a little difficult in the point cloud, but if you want to refine it a bit more, you just have to pick it and you can move that guy right over to the right spot and you'll be on your way. You just have to drag it, click, and then you can see it's moved everywhere. It's right on. And I think that's really going to be the big deal kind of a feature for our users. So let's move on to the rest of this.